Hello and welcome to Fostering Inclusion with New Ways of Working. My name is Georgia Emilios and I am the production lead for ITW and the lead for Capacity's Inclusion First initiative. I would first like to take the opportunity to thank the sponsors of the Inclusion First track for 2021 for supporting this event. So thank you to Bankai, Verizon, and Seaborn for sponsoring this track. If you would like to ask any questions to the panel throughout the session, you can do so using the live chat function on the Swapcard app or on the desktop version if you're joining us virtually. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists joining me today. We have Priyanka Brahmbhatt, the Executive Director and Group Strategist for Bankai, Todd Coleman, CEO of eStructure, Chandy Ghosh, the Chief Operating Officer of Intelliquent, and Sonal Patel, VP of Marketing for Verizon Partner Solutions. Hello, everyone, and hello to the ladies over there in DC and National Harbor. Good to see you. And hello to those joining me virtually. So now just to kind of jump into things, Priyanka, I'm going to come to you first, and then we want to keep this conversational. So everyone don't be scared to also ask questions on Swapcard, and I'll be monitoring. But just as we start and we look kind of at the last, well, almost 2 years at this point, how has your organization evolved over the last 20 months to kind of address what these new ways of working are?
I would say being in a technology company really helped to ease into this new way of working last 20 months. What we did was from the logistics to connectivity across the globe and all the employees across the globe was really nicely harbored. And at the same time, when we talk about inclusion, what last 20 months really did was it took away the nuances of needing the team to be around the physical vicinity to be there to hire the new people. So it kind of eased down into our HR operations, eased down into the gender equality too, because women working from their home also had their partners working from their home. So it kind of shared the responsibilities. So we really got into this not whoring on the desk principles and more like trust on and faith on the on the results rather than the processes.
Okay, great. And then so yeah, I mean, when we talk about obviously new ways of working, I feel like actually we probably should have clarified in the beginning. Obviously, it's the fact that, you know, we're no longer really kind of in that full office mode, kind of as you mentioned. And then just to kind of, I think probably with this one, let's maybe just like go around the room and you know, kind of see what people's thoughts are. But for example, you know, Sonal, coming to you next, you know, how have you guys found this over the last 20 months?
Sure, thank you for the question. For Verizon, I think we've looked at it as there were many phases. So there was, you know, the first phase in March, it was employee safety first. So really focused on what do we need to do to make sure our teams and our people are safe. And you moved quickly into the realization that this was phase 2, and now that we were not going back in the office in just about 2 weeks, we needed to start preparing for how we were going to work as a team, as individuals, as families, in more of a virtual world and caring for our customers. So the responsibilities, as Priyanka says, like everyone's co-living together, you were balancing your work, you were balancing family, you were balancing customers at all 24/7 hours of the day. So that phase became a lot longer of what anyone would have anticipated that virtual environment was going to be like. But we kept the priority on safety of individuals, safety of our customers, but also meeting the needs of both our personal and professional lives. So that phase was really important on restructuring the new norms. What was virtual going to be? We went from audio only to audio and video, or some people didn't have video, and we were accepting of the fact that not everyone could be on video all the time. And now we're kind of in the work forward phase. So as we look at kind of the third phase that we're working through now is how do we do things like this in a hybrid environment? What are the things that we take from what the old world looked like versus what we did in a virtual world and really bring it together in a hybrid environment to say, look, we can meet the needs of our personal and professional lives in a more hybrid scenario that provides flexibility in each of our schedules, but also flexibility in how our customers want to do business with us as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then Chandy, over to you and Intelliquent this year. Kind of how have you guys kind of noticed it?
Yeah, hi, Georgia and the panel. We're
Hello.
very happy. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me. At Intelliquent, our focus has been on inclusion.
Yeah.
I would think there are three main initiatives. First one that we did, which worked really well, is these virtual introduction between teams that are in different locations, trying to bring people together, trying to get to know each other, what these functions are that are being done in a different part of the country, just to get that togetherness. The second item that I think was very popular, every quarter we have these virtual team buildings. We
Yeah.
play online games. I'd love to share one of our. I hosted a sports cap game, which worked out better than I expected because very often people, just like we were saying, there are people who don't like coming on video, there are people who don't like
Hmm.
speaking. And especially when you're having some kind of whether it's a virtual game or a team building event, everyone doesn't speak the same amount. What I found very
Hmm. Yeah.
fascinating was in the sports cap game, they're all so excited about their teams and why they're so proud of
Yeah.
them that they all started talking about it. And it was, it worked out really well. So these are
Yeah.
just some ideas for folks. And the last one I'd say is in our quarterly surveys, we basically went into a much deeper dive into DEI subjects. We
Hmm.
wanted employees to feel included, appreciated, and valued. And so we wanted to get that feedback to see what is it we could improve. So those are like three of the primary initiatives.
Yeah, great. So a lot of, kind of great things happening over there and a lot of kind of new ways of engaging. And then finally, last but certainly not least, Todd, over to you, Ready Structure.
Yeah, look, we've done a lot of the similar things that everyone's repeated. So first off, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I guess over the 20 months, probably much like you, like everything kicked off with a bang, right? We were in a virtual world. Zoom was new. Everyone was doing virtual happy hours. You saw it all over LinkedIn. And I think we were all spending months asking, hey, when do we get back to normal or whatever the new normalcy is? And before we all knew it, we were in a new normalcy. We just didn't realize it was going to be 18 months on, right? And so
Yeah.
I think what we've learned over the last 20 months, different from where we were in March, April, May, June, July, is you gotta work to not allow complacency to set in. In
Hmm.
our situation, we 2.5 times our workforce during COVID, right? Through
Wow.
acquisition, both organic and inorganic growth. And our culture was largely based on personal relationships, water cooler discussions, all the informality. And so,
Yeah.
for us, the challenge was how do you bring that relationship context that is built out of informality into a much more formal world? How you think about
Mhm.
reaching out to people. And so, everything from creating ambassadorships on how we touch base with people, all the sort of awards and games that Chandy talked about. But for us, it went beyond that. It's why do I have to have a reason to call somebody on video? When you realize
Yeah.
that Zoom, you can call someone direct one on one, you don't actually have to schedule a call. And so for us, it was the evolution of how do we bring it back to a more informal setting? You'd be shocked when you reach out to someone one on one and they think you're calling because you're about to task them or you're about to ask them a status. But in reality, I just want to know how you're doing. And so I think
Yeah.
that's our biggest evolution, especially in this virtual world, is how do we go back to that informality of talking to people at the water cooler, but doing it virtually just to make sure they're doing okay. I think our setting probably is slightly different because we run the gamut of age ranges in our workforce, everything from the recently graduated to people like me that might be in the sunset of their career,
Hmm.
and then realizing that along that spectrum, there's multi-generational living quarters, there's all sorts of health issues. We've evolved from thinking about what's required of a place in life balance to parenting in a workplace and life balance. And it may or may not be a mother, although it still falls to the mother in a large regard, but you have this whole parenting relationship that everyone talked about. And so I think for us, it's the emotional intelligence that came along with the last 20 months. And then the last one is, remember, in the same 20-month period, we ran into social injustice in a massive way worldwide. And so the conversations that we began to have in around our dinner table and then around our Zoom calls with our employees evolved. And I think the one of the sort of the glass half full opportunities that came out of that is it caused us to start talking to people from a diverse background around other issues that might impact them in the workplace, but also impact them outside of the workplace. And so, as I like to phrase it, we started running at taboo. All those topics that were taboo 20 months ago, we're a lot more comfortable having those conversations. So that, I think that's the great gift of the last 20 months.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can completely agree with you, and that's so important and such a big evolution. I think, Chandy, was there something that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think it's absolutely very important what Todd just mentioned, because I think one of the things, don't shy away from controversial topics, over communicate, call out unacceptable behaviors, be vulnerable, share what it means to you, what the things going on around you. There's some CEOs who have been so outspoken that are just, it's amazing because you want, the world to hear your viewpoint. And to me, it's absolutely a very critical thing. And this whole, during the pandemic, all the issues that occurred from the social perspectives was just as important in dealing with, what's been going on around the world.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you guys, and and of course, we're all kind of speaking from different parts of the world as well. But I mean, you definitely saw during this pandemic that evolution where it was, kind of what you guys were saying about the emotional intelligence. So it was like we started with figuring out how do we bring that informality into this, like you guys mentioned, this very formal space where we're now on Zoom calls all the time, and you're not bumping into someone to see how they are. You have to make an active step to do that. And so it was figuring that all out, seeing, kind of the different context clues of what could be going on in our teams and our wider company, but then adding in, again, all of these social, societal topics that came up. And it was, well, how are we feeding this in? And it was almost like it built and evolved. And now that this, as we've kind of figured out these new ways of working, and it seems that this, to an extent, this kind of new hybrid, model of being at home, being in the office, as that kind of comes in, it's great how important all of those lessons have been in order for us to be able to move forward and kind of accommodate as a workforce for these kind of new formats. So moving on, I just wanted to say kind of, and I think we kind of started touching on it. So, kind of Sonal, coming to you first on this. When we look at this hybrid, kind of remote working environment, what have we learned, and kind of what are we kind of seeing that we're going to be bringing in now to the future?
Yeah, so I'll carry some of the conversation we were just talking about. I really feel like we've humanized the workplace. I think when I first started my career, it was a little bit of the mentality of, you go to work to do work, you leave your home life at home, and you rarely talked about your children, your extracurricular activities, things that were important to you, societal causes, any foundations or any work that you did extracurricular-wise. Now I feel like, to Shandy's point about those tough conversations, as leaders, we're providing an environment where you can bring the best of you and all parts of you to the table, to the discussion, to talk about how best you're going to show up as a business leader, as an employee, how you're going to show up for your customers in an environment that you're comfortable in. So it gives us a stage to set the way we work with all the goodness of us, like being a mother, being a advocate for any social rights, bringing all of that into a workplace. It's really humanized how we do business. And I think that's really important as, we take the best from that as we look forward and we continue to work forward, is how do we create those environments where we can share best practices, conversations, things that are important to us, because we know it's going to help bring diversity of thought into the organization on how we approach business topics as well.
Great, amazing. And I think then just kind of moving over to this, over to you, Priyanka, and kind of looking at this.
Yes,
How would you guys say
absolutely.
that, it's going forward?
Yeah, like I agree with Sonal. Like she said, it while when the pandemic happened and we had to all move virtual, it must have felt really overwhelming. How are we going to do this? This entire community of the office is going to collapse. How are we going to manage? But in fact, it actually included all the roles that we play in the same panorama. You know, you
Hmm.
could you could do all the things simultaneously much more productively because then your mind is not at home while you're at office, and so and so forth. And at the same time, it kind of opened the avenues even with the colleagues because now you're not limited to a physical vicinity of one floor or one cubicle
Hmm.
or like, that meeting clubs after the office all really like limited everyone to one certain group. This actually allowed everyone to interact across the board. So if anytime it was the right time to bring in the flat management or flat operation, it was now during these last 20 months to bring that in. Like, you want to get the work done, include everyone, like include all the stakeholders, because now you're just like a Zoom away. It also kind of involved us into our colleagues and our team's personal space a little bit, which kind of helped to build that connection. Because you must have seen that famous, very well-known viral video of CNN reporter, the kids walking in
Yes.
the meeting,
Absolutely.
right? And then things happened, right? And then you keep the next question is like, hey, how's your kid? Your kid's really cute. Hey, nice background on the wall. The wall color is really good. But it kind of
True.
brings up the conversation starter. So it's really, that kind of helped a lot with like work-life balance and bringing in the connection and equity.
Mhm. No, I completely agree. And I think the other thing as well with this remote working, and I think you'll probably all agree, especially as we were talking earlier, and I think several of you touched on it. You have kind of the different households, and it's really given us an insight into that. I think Todd, you mentioned it before of you can see kind of the life situations that people are working in, and kind of see what you can do also as a company to kind of help them, and kind of manage that. Is there, I think, anything else you would kind of like to add on these kind of hybrid environments?
Well, look, I think it's just a general acute awareness that we've all gained over the last 20 months, right? It's a perspective on seeing our employees as family members, as head of households, as individuals that have legitimate concerns. And so, as we all work toward a different work-life balance, I think that's the probably the greatest gift that we've received, and a recognition that, and especially as we think about D&I, not everyone is created equal by any stretch, regardless of race, color, background, social status, religion. Like, so I think there's, if I think back 20 months ago, we would think about, okay, well, we have some working moms, they need flexibility on work schedules. We have some recent mothers, we got to think about privacy in the work environment to allow them to care for their children. We got to think about some religious aspects, particularly given our culture within our organization. But now it goes way beyond that. I mean, we think of everyone very differently as individuals. And then, as we talked about, I think it's caused, other people within our work environment and within our organization have an awareness. Like, what is it? What is the burden of a mother to get kids off to school, to get them fed, to get them cared and nurtured, and now that's shared responsibility. So I think that the level of emotional intelligence that's increased over the last 20 months is exponential. I just look forward to taking that forward and not losing sight of what we've learned and gained from the past 20 months.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and parents in general. I mean, I think definitely over these last 20 months and kind of interacting with the industry, we've, I think it's that a lot of people have been a lot more open in general about what their other responsibilities are, and kind of how that that comes into us. And then kind of finally over to you, Chandy, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. So the learnings over the past 20 months, I think, for me have been think about the team dynamics. Things have
Mm-hmm.
flipped since the pandemic. Remember, in the past, most people would come into the office, and there were certain employees who were remote, and there was always a little bit of this, oh, well, remote employees have it easy. They're at home, they're enjoying it. And now all that is flipped. It's leveled the playing field. And we now appreciate those challenges that, working from home is not a piece of cake. It's not like you're just sitting and eating cake and enjoying life. I mean, we're seeing how difficult it is. The other aspect is this whole isolation aspect. Employees dealing with mental health issues, social issues, personal issues. You don't want them to leave the workforce. The alarming rates that people are leaving the workforce, especially women. How do we keep them engaged? How do we bring them back? I work in 911 and I know all about PTSD. And it's something that you have to work on all the time to make sure that your employees stay engaged and you're helping them, especially giving time off. I think that's such a huge thing that we kind of, well, we're restricted to, vacation days, this, etc. But talking one-on-one, like Todd mentioned, getting that individual interaction and understanding what is going on in someone's life. That's key. And this whole Zoom fatigue, it's real. And to be able
Yeah.
to understand people, who are the introverts, who are the extroverts, and catering it to that. I prefer being on Zoom because I tend to lean towards the extroverts, especially with customers. I love seeing, interacting, and seeing the emotional response. But there are people who don't like that, and how do you deal with those situations? And the last one I'll talk about is, the coming across. One of the key things is to understand what unconscious bias means, because very often when you're in a workplace and you're standing and talking to somebody, you say something or you do something that affects somebody else. The other person may not take it very personally because they know you're, a good person, that you didn't mean it, and they'll brush it off. If your only interaction is on a screen and suddenly you do something that's completely, against somebody else's principle, that could really tick people off. And so to be able to understand and overcome systemic unconscious bias, everyone has it. I have it. Every one of us has it. And to own it, to be aware, and to change, to become an advocate, to understand these things, absolutely critical. And last thing I'll say is, totally agree with what Priyanka said about tech. We're lucky as tech folks. For us to have moved to this situation was so much easier. I have so many friends who are teachers struggling even now after 20 months to be able to teach online, to do all the homework online with their students, and learning the tools, the Zoom tools, and they'll be talking to their spouses and think they're not live. And, it's a challenge, and, we have it easy actually, but we have to
Yeah.
appreciate everything going on.
To add to Chandy, like it's very interesting that you brought up the mental health aspect into this, because which is so true. Because while you're not tied to a vicinity in the office, you're also tied to your screen constantly, and then you have that consciousness that, oh, I hope my kid doesn't make the noise. Or, there's a meme going on, like the lawnmower doesn't come around the house and turn on the lawnmower while the Zoom call is on, and all that stuff. It kind of adds on to the stress. But at the same time, I think it's very important for the companies to, because we don't know exactly when we are going to have the normal that we once did, completely. But right now we are going through this whole flexible transition and all that stuff. It's very important for us to even have that collaborated campaigns going on internally. Like, hey, do you live around here? I'm going to go for a run for the park. Let's have this thing going. Let's have our Apple Watches, Samsung Watches shared, and see how active we are, how many steps did you put in. So that way we also encourage physical health that also supports mental health, that hey, it's okay, you gotta take a break. You need to go to the gym, you need to go do yoga or whatever, but let's do it as a community too, because like Todd said, emotional intelligence, I think it also incorporates over here is let's go beyond work tasks to really help each other grow, because when your employees are going to be mentally and physically healthy, that's when they can put in the best in the work as well.
The other thing is we hopefully are getting a greater awareness, but we need to remember that while we're working from home, we're potentially always working at some level, right? And that ties into the mental health. So, those friendly reminders of reaching out and letting people know that they need to shut down, because even I find myself in boredom migrating back to my home office. Oh, I'll just check that email. I got one more thing to do. And that goes, our work days have extended. So I think, both Shandy and Priyanka mentioned a couple of things that I think are super important. One is the unconscious bias that Shandy mentioned, right? I think letting people know, our teams know, that we have vulnerability. We're not going to get this 100% right. I might use language that I didn't really use it intentionally. I just used it without as much thought as I would have liked to have had, right? And so raising your hand and acknowledging to your teams, your workforce, that we're not going to be perfect in this. We're learning as they are, but we're listening at the same time. So hopefully we've become better listeners. The second piece about the vulnerability is letting people know, look, I'll be the first to admit, I'm sitting here in Lululemon shorts. You just see my dress shirt for the day, right? It's okay to show up and not have your makeup on. It's okay to show up in a baseball cap. It's okay to show up in t-shirts. And, I'll take phone calls from my team and let them know it's 12:30 in the afternoon, but you know what? My daughter just let me know we ran out of milk and I'm running to the grocery store, right? So I think as leaders, we also need to not give an image that we're perfect. We live in that same environment. And so I think the more that we can be vulnerable with our people and let them know we're undergoing some of the same sacrifices and challenges, and let them know that we appreciate where they're coming from, so that they're okay opening up and expressing their concerns, will take us that much farther to addressing some of those issues around mental health and other things as we, as you say, get back to a hybrid work environment. But for sure, I have a new appreciation for anyone that stays at home or works at home, because I'm doing those same midday grocery runs that all of you are doing.
If I
Hey,
can
Todd,
add
what's
to
with
that a
men
little bit.
and Lululemon?
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, Lululemon. I know. I'm loving it. I'm wearing slippers, but that's as far as I went today because I never knew if I'd need to get up suddenly. Sonal, you wanted to add?
Sure. Just a couple things. I was going to say, I think it really gets down to that one-to-one connectivity, and we redefine that. In the office, it was you come over, you ask me a question, and we talk about a work item. Now the one-to-one connection is so much broader. It encompasses every element of your life, and you're building the relationship with your employees, your customers on that connection. So the relationship is stronger. And you can have the discussions, as we're talking about unconscious bias, of things that you may have said in a meeting that were inappropriate and someone else did. But now at that human level, I can say, hey, so-and-so, perhaps we should have handled this situation in a different way, or perhaps you did not take off this filter. But previously, it would have, hid in my box and said, that's an unapproachable conversation, I'm not going to have it. But I think we've really, the thread, the fabric within the organization, the cultures we're creating is that openness and communication that's helping us get to some of the social, mental, physical well-being of not just ourselves, but even our organizations, and how we thrive in an environment where we're caring for each other at a personal level while it's helping us care for our business.
I think
Well
that
said.
was, yeah, you make such an excellent point there, Sonal, with that. And it actually ties in really well with a question that I've just seen us get in from the audience. But before I kind of go on to that, just a couple of points from things that you all said. And I think maybe tips that we've gotten throughout the year, just throughout kind of inclusion first, which really kind of hit a chord was, obviously, I think Todd, you kind of mentioned, and Priyanka, like how many of us are actually doing the 9 to 5 anymore? Not. We're kind of migrating back. And for a bit, I think I don't know if it was the same for your organizations, but we kind of almost felt that pressure when you see someone else on late, kind of sending emails where you're just kind of like, am I supposed to be doing that? What's kind of the thing there? And what I've seen kind of help and from a few customers and colleagues is people putting in their, email signatures. Just because I'm responding out of normal working hours does not mean that I expect the same, kind of response time. this is what works for me with flexible working. I'm not expecting you to also respond out of hours. And I think that's helped kind of a little bit as a small, quick win. And then, kind of also just then kind of going on to back to this question from the audience, what they ask and, kind of how our cultures are evolving is how has the term, and I think this is a great question, cultural fit evolved from your work environment now? So, of course, when we all are recruiting people for our companies, we think, oh, are you a good cultural fit? How has that evolved now in light of the last 20 months? I leave this open to the floor for anyone to pick up.
Yeah, I think that whole concept of cultural fit has changed. I mean, to me, in the past, cultural fit was fit into the mold of what you already are. And to me, it's like bring new ideas. I don't want the same so-called cultural fit. I want people to be, that whole point about diversity, bring new ideas, bring new backgrounds, bring new, community, folks from different communities, get different ideas, and you'll always get better engagement, and you reflect your customers, you reflect society. Um, yeah, to me, that whole cultural fit is more, to me, the culture is be more diverse. So then your whole concept of what is cultural changes. What does that fit?
So do we think it's defunct as kind of a concept or a, kind of aspect of recruitment in general now that we're looking to be more diverse? Do we think maybe it's a tool of the past?
Unless your culture is be more diverse, and then you say yes.
Yeah.
It all depends on how you define that word. In the past, like you just said, the cultural fit at that time was fit my mold. This is what I have, and I want more of you. And now that's changed. It's like, and if my culture, if I make it, my number one point is I want a very diverse organization, then of course, I want everybody out there saying, okay, let's make sure all our teams are diverse, our teams are, reflect what our priorities are.
Great,
What,
great.
to add to that, when we talk about culture fit, Georgia, you told about, you just asked about defunking it. It's more like, it's more like expanding it. It's expanding the culture itself. Like Chandy said, it's not in a mold. It is more like, let's go with the flow, let's go where the world is going, but at the same time, let's be ahead of it, because even while you're hiring new people, it's no more constrained to, Bankai has offices across the globe, right? But even across the globe, we would have, hey, if you're working in London, then this is the vicinity, can you come into the office? But no, now you can be in the most ruralist part of the world, you can still be working, and you can come from a very diverse culture, like a social culture, but at the same time an industrial culture. So to really, because every one of us are learning as leaders, as employees, everyone, we are all on the same learning curve. So I was recently talking to someone. I was saying that this is the idiot curve that we are going through, and it's so important for us to accept that, so that we give other people come in, bring the innovation, make mistakes, learn from it, and move on. So I think that's the culture fit that we have also adopted.
Yeah, I think we're all saying it's evolving, right? There isn't one culture that defines an organization or a team. I think it's continuously changing because the environments we work in continuously change. I mean, we're technology. I think in the last 20 months, we accelerated 10 years into the future from a transformation perspective. So the culture is going to continuously change. But I think we're saying that the foundations of diversity, inclusion, how we treat each other, the humanity elements are really the DNA that help fuel the changes in the culture. So as changes come, we always come back to our own playbook or our threads as individuals to say this is how we want to act in those scenarios.
I think for us, the honest answer is we're struggling with that definition of what that looks like going forward. I mean, we started this company 4.5 years ago, and I did it on the basis that I've worked in telecom and infrastructure for 20 plus years, and historically, it's a good old boys white club. And we embraced that notion from the get-go. And so as a result, we're 57% of our workforce is diverse. And that's after we 2.5 times the workforce over the last 20 months. But that part for us takes a life of its own, because once you create that safe environment and women, people of color, people of different backgrounds recognize that this is a safe place and that they get rewarded and promoted along the way, it takes life of its own. Our challenge is that our culture, being a relatively small company, we have 150 employees, is very family oriented. Our employees use the word family when they in replace of team. And so for us, the challenge is, how do we continue to drive that culture, which frankly got created on its own? I didn't do anything to create that. That's just people building upon people. And so creating that in this hybrid work environment is challenging. We're also going through a massive integration of a company that we acquired in May. And we're bringing in, and they had 4 or 5 different cultures because they were the amalgamation of 4 or 5 different acquisitions. And so this notion of culture really takes a lot of intent and thought, even though it tends to happen on its own over time. That's the best culture you can build. But it really takes a lot of different thought process in this virtual hybrid work environment of how you evolve it, thinking about brand ambassadors, culture ambassadors, those reach outs, those touch bases of, hey, just touching base with a person just to see how they're doing, just to give them a vent or an outlet. That's also part of the culture that you're developing, because if you do it to somebody, I promise you'll do it to 2 or 3 others. And so for us, it's taking a lot of current thought process and leadership across our organization on how do we continue to evolve the culture in the right way, but thinking about the new environment. I mean, I have people that are on my executive team that I've actually never met in person, right? That's a strange phenomenon for me. And so if you take that throughout the organization, and we forget about it over time, right? Because we spend so much time on Zoom, but then you walk into a room and you finally get the chance to meet them one-on-one, and you've forgotten that you actually haven't met them in person. So these are sort of voyages of discovery as we go. So I don't have the perfect answer, but if someone does, I'd love to hear it, but it's certainly on our mind.
I mean, I think as well, Todd, there, you really kind of almost answered and really touched on the next question, which was basically looking at how leadership is changing and how does it need to change to address D&I. And it sounds like from your side and eStructures, it's very much about having that conscious intent and really making sure that you are being open and honest about perhaps one, where work needs to be done, but also where you guys are making strides and are purposely trying to increase that diversity and inclusion. And then sorry, go on.
Look, I think one thing about D&I is, if it doesn't start at the top, through the walk, not the talk, it's not gonna take a life of its own, right? I actually spend more time talking about D&I in panels and forums like this, because I think it's super important for our industry to get on board, right? We're far from being diverse and inclusive across our infrastructure and telecom industry, but we're evolving, right? Thank goodness. What I think is phenomenal is I can see it in my own organization. D&I takes a life of its own, as I mentioned, right? Once you start it, once you show that you're open, once you've proven that you will walk the walk as much as you talk about it, it permeates top to bottom throughout the organization. But it does start at the top. The person at the top has to be a believer. Your board has to look diverse. Your executive team has to look diverse. And then you see it move throughout the organization. But it is that purposeful intent that you mentioned. It doesn't happen overnight.
I think that's an important point to say it's purposeful, is that we're making the steps in telecom to make sure we're building the future technologists of all race, color, breed, et cetera. So I think to your point about how do we groom them, it's the programs we build, it's conversations, having the difficult conversations, it's training, it's development, it's recruiting, but it's really defining that it's going to be a priority. And I think that's what's great about these conversations. I think telco has really realized that this is a problem that we collectively need to focus in on, and how do we solve it together? It's not going to be one team, one organization, but it really needs to be more of an effort.
Definitely. I think Chandy and I got on this panel last year. I think it was one of the first panels of telecom industry to even talk about diversity and inclusion. And I think we see this change because today we are here again talking about it, right? And we are really taking as a very major equity of your operational changes that needs to happen. So I think that's the cultural leadership that we are talking about, like Sonal said.
The two
So,
items on leadership that I just
mhm.
want to add here. One is it was touched upon. I think Todd mentioned boards. So I'm on the 50-50 Women on Boards initiative for Colorado. And this is very important. I mean, for us today, as you know, we're, after a lot of effort, we've gotten to about 20% women on boards. Getting to 50% is going to take a massive effort, and all of us need to be part of that. And so that's if those policies and practices come top down from boards, CEOs, all the way down, that's how we'll make real change. The second aspect is the topic that's very near and dear to my heart is mentoring. How do we keep coaching and mentoring? I'm with the university in Colorado, and we basically I have a bunch of younger women assigned to me, and I coach and mentor them. And that's something that's so important because to be able to provide them that, telling them that their voice matters, that this is something that they really need to pursue and be vocal. We're all vocal advocates of the new ways of doing work, and so it's absolutely diversity, inclusion, D&I is very important.
Fantastic. Now, I know that we had one more question left to discuss, but I can see that we are starting to run out of time. And I think actually from the questions I can see from the audience, they actually incorporate the last thing that we wanted to cover today. So I've got a question in from Heather who's saying, what is one way, or what are ways that a business where diversity has not been a priority can evolve in an authentic way for the business, and that for the business, the employees, and the customers? So I think the question is sort of where maybe it hasn't been a priority. How are we able to evolve that culture? Which really talks into what does sustainable transformation look like? So I'm going to start back with you, Chandy, on this one first, as I know you were going to lead on the last question.
Yeah, to me, see, sustainable transformation, there's two aspects to it. There's the whole structural change, which is very clearly, you have your processes, you have your practices, you define things. And, there are lots of fantastic models out there, written by Korn Ferry, McKinsey, and many others, and they go through sourcing, selection, attraction, retention of candidates, etc. But truly, I mean, so, I recommend that you review and, look at a lot of that material. But the big change is truly what comes from within, which is the behavioral change, which is your mindset, your skill sets, your relationships, and that is key. How do you make that change? Because in the end, frankly, the result of a sustainable transformation will be reflected in your business, increased business. You will see your profits rise. You will see that your business, the bottom line is going to be much better because a happier, diverse, balanced demographic will basically lead to better decision making, and that'll result in more satisfied customers buying your products, etc. So, there's a very good correlation. There's all kinds of studies that show that, diversity and I initiatives will lead your business to be a much more successful business.
Great, fantastic. And then over to you ladies in DC on the stage. If you have anything you want to add kind of on that in terms of where maybe it wasn't a priority before, how we can kind of get to that evolution and find sustainable transformation.
Yeah, sorry.
It's hard to hear a little bit
Yeah,
on
it
the
is very,
stage. You
yeah.
can't hear the questions too
Oh,
loud.
sorry.
Yeah, so like Chandy said, it has to be flown down into the DNA of the culture, like from the way you think, the way you behave, the way you work. But at the same time, when you talk about sustainability, we have to make sure that every change that we are bringing in with this new way of working and inclusion, we are bringing every stakeholder on board. And that is when it's going to be sustainable in the long term. Because if you leave out one person or one gender or one other culture fit, it's not going to relate to them, and that's what's going to impact the decision making in this sense. So again, to rephrase, to bring in the sustainable change, bring all the stakeholders on board while decision making, and also to remember that when we include everyone, we also bring in new ideas on the board, which reflects everyone, even your customers, which are very diverse.
Great, fantastic. And Sonal, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? And then finally, we'll go to Todd, and then we will kind of close off the session.
Right. Yeah, the only thing I would add to the comments that were said is that the sustainability piece is that you don't just start it and end it. There's no start and end. It's just that constant evolution, and you're incorporating new items into the process. So I can't say in 5 or 10 years this is what it's going to look like, because in 5 or 10 years the line's going to change. The line in the sand is going to look different. So I need to make sure in that sustainability I'm building in change and feedback and ways to improve throughout the course of time.
Fantastic.
So I won't add, I agree with everyone's comments, but I do want to speak to the question from the audience. And I think you used the word authenticity, and I think that's the real answer on how you start to address it. And I agree with what Sonal just said, which is it's an evolution. But for those organizations that haven't begun to embrace it, first off, you got to decide if you have an issue at the top, right? And I think it starts with having an open conversation. And that's what we've learned over the last 20 months is we can go have an open conversation. Second piece is we need to be authentic. I could spend 2 hours talking about how great my company is, how great my leadership is, but I like to go approach it and tell people where we've also missed the mark, where I've missed the mark. And so I think some of that authenticity around starting that conversation with your workforce is to admit where you haven't gotten it perfectly correct. And then the third piece, and I think Priyanka spoke to it, is you need to engage all the levels. So, start with, here's our opportunity set. Here's our challenges. We haven't been perfect. We're not diverse from a workforce. Start engaging the rest of the organization in their ideation so they make that problem set their opportunity going forward and help be part of the solution. So I think it's transparency. I think it's authenticity. I think it's admitting where your failures have been and then identifying the opportunity set. That is the dialogue. But again, that assumes that the top of the organization is listening. And most importantly, in that dialogue, there has to be a whole lot more listening than talking when it comes to engaging the workforce in that problem set and the opportunity going forward. So my two thoughts. And then the last piece is there's a whole bunch of us on this call, and there's a lot more of us out there that are always happy to be engaged and help and tell our stories on how it's helped our workforce, how it's helped our company, to Chandy's point, how it's helped our bottom line, given us greater creativity by bringing in a completely diverse and energetic workforce. So here to help in any way we can.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for making this session fantastic. We have had a lot of fantastic takeaways, and I know that there were more questions in the chat that we didn't manage to get to, but I would like to tell everyone that we are also hosting an Inclusion First Roundtable virtually at 12 o'clock. So please do feel free to come with your questions there, and we can have a more open forum and discussion as well. So for that, I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for that lively discussion. This session is going to be available for on-demand viewing through SwapCard for the next 30 days post-event. And I would once again like to thank all of you for your thoughts and for contributing and for being the advocates that you are in the industry as well. I would like to also just note that while this session was going on, we had a fantastic session happening virtually as well with IO. So please make sure to check that out on SwapCard. And next, we will be joined at 11 o'clock at EDT. We will be seeing the satellite track, and we've got the new role of satellite in the connectivity in this ecosystem. Thank you, and see you all very soon.
Thank you.